So all right, team, once again, thank you so much for joining us. So in today's session, we'll be learning about Terraform input variables. So we do have a different type of variables while working with Terraform. So we'll try to understand each one, how it works and where we can use them, right? So first of all, let us understand when I say variables, sorry, input variable, everybody knows, right? So input variables are parameters that you can define within your Terraform configuration files to make them dynamic and reusable. These variables enable you to customize your infrastructure deployment based on specific needs or environment differences. So it is very simple, as we all know, right? Variable is something. Say, for example, we have a container where we place something and call with a particular name. Let's say you have a mobile number. Sorry, for example, we have a for each person would have their name, right? Unique name. Let's say if I had to call you, just think that way. If I had to call you, I will not remember by your phone number. I will rather remember by your name. So if I search with your name, automatically your contact number will be dialed right to your number basically. So in that simplest way, you can understand that one. So I hope this is clear. Variable mean basically you will keep some name and you are actually retrieving the what you call the value. Okay, so we will understand that. So input variables we have same similar way in Terraform also, that is we'll understand very basic. Then we will see provide input variables when prompted during Terraform apply or plan. So even if you don't define the input like variable name during the, I mean whatever the variable, you can actually define the value during Terraform apply also. So that means you can only give the variable name. You don't have to define the variable value. But then when you run Terraform plan or maybe apply them, you would have to define the value as well. So this will ask like, let's say, what is your resource group name? What is your location? Something like that. It can also be configured that way also. But that is not a good practice, but it is good to understand still, right? Then we have something called as override default variable by using CLI. So yeah, then we have provide input variables using Terraform.tvs. These all I think we have already learned last time, but we will discuss once again the differences. And there's something called as a provide input variables using any name.tvs. That means you can have any kind of name you can give, but always at last you would have something called as .tvs file. Okay, and if you want to pass particular this thing, you can mention like a wed file. We'll see this also. Then also we have something called as some file name and dot auto bars. So there are different type of things, and of course this also we need to understand like protect sensitive input variables. Say for example, for any reason I don't want to basically output my some information. Let's say storage account ID or storage account maybe related some sensitive information, right? So I can this uh, mention as sensitive within your variable so that you don't have to basically nobody can see basically, right? So let's get started. Then we will also see output also based on the input. We need to output also why we have to define the output, that also we will see in the real time cases. Okay, so we have said the output basically, like as I told you, output values are like a return values of a Terraform module and several uses. A root module can use outputs to print certain values in the CLI output after running Terraform apply. So you basically don't worry, we will understand more about the output. Okay, I will show you in real this thing once we have done. So what we'll do first, as I told you, we'll go with the output basic. This is output, right? This is okay. Input is not there. Okay, no problem. So we'll go with the input. I think I forgot to mention the input example here, right? So anyway, we will do that. Otherwise, we have already done it, right? So I can just show you as I have. Let me first, I'm into my particular repository. So let me switch now. First, I will switch to, okay. So if I just click here as let's say git branch, because I'm within my real-time infrastructure as code with Terraform on Azure repository, right? So I would be seeing right now I'm in the staging. Okay, so let's work within the staging itself, so that we don't have to for now we don't have to think much about the main. So let's stick with the staging area branch now. So in the staging area, I mean staging branch, we have branch called staging. Within this, what we need is we have to define the output. I mean input. Now let's go one by one. Right. We have this. If you see the structure before that, okay, you may be confused with this structure now, but don't worry, I will explain you later why we use this way. But for now, your work is to basically remove everything and then just understand this main topic. So let's go with the first one. Let's go with the storage account. If you go to the storage account, we have basically what we are trying to do is that, let me maybe make this also this way so that you can see easily. So what exactly we are doing is, as I told you, whenever you want to create any resource, you always need to define with the resource block. This is a this thing. And here we have a type of the resource. In our case, it is a resource group. And this is basically a reference name. You can call as a basically, this is basically a reference name. That means this particular ID it should be unique. Okay. You cannot have same ID in multiple times when you use the same resource type. That means if you're using the resource group, resource type as a resource group, you cannot have same name RG. But let's say if you're creating some other resource type, let's say storage account, if you want to give a same name, you can give it. You can still define the same local name because it will be called with the resource type and then local name. That's how it works. Okay. Now the second thing is the name. Name, you might be thinking how this name looks. Normally if you go to this, as I told you, always go to the official documents. So let me click the official documentations. So yeah, so I will just go here. If I type here, what I type was, I just type the provider name and type of my resource. In my case, it is a resource group, right? Now as soon as I click there, it will take me to the official documentations where you can basically understand what else required. So I have already discussed last time also, right? We have discussed that let's say if I have to create the resource group, what are the something called as arguments, right? We have a key value pair arguments, right? So how do we know what all requires, right? So this is the reason why always good practice to refer the documentation, that is official documentation. Okay, HCCF one. Now if you come here below, there is something called as arguments. Click over there. So you would see require here with the bracket, right? So that means this whenever you are creating the resource group type, that means in your case resource group you are creating, you need a resource group locations as well as the name. These two are mandatory. Rest like text or any other ID, everything it is optional. Similar way, okay. Now as I told you, if you want to manage, let's say this particular resource group is not managed using Terraform, let's say in this case you can use something called a Terraform import. But there is so there are some process out there. We will discuss the later. For now, you just understand we can also manage the existing resource using Terraform, right? Okay. Now let's come to the point, that is the input variable. So if you notice here, I given this is, so as I told you, this name can be anything. Now I have a name of the resource group, that is example, and this is the very simple example. Now if you notice here, the name actually it is hard coded, right? It is actually hard coded. Now say for example you have so many different resources, different places you might have been basically you would be using it. So normally nobody prefer to use your actual value in your Terraform itself. So you need to basically make some like something called as a variable, so that you can define this variable somewhere else and call the variable, I mean the particular resource group name based on the variable name. Okay. So basically you will be calling from the variable name. So we will see that one. So I have already done this as I told you, but I will show you still. If you go to variable.tf, You might be thinking this also, this is a optional, but if you know this is good, because why I wanted to explain or maybe show here is that because if you go actually in the real time project, right, so normally this is how they will be creating variables. So otherwise one more option I can do is, say, let's say if you're very beginners, you want to learn, instead of this one I can define like this. I'll just show you a difference so that you get some idea, right? So I'll just mention basic. Okay, examples. Now let's say same way I can define. Now if I have to define, just imagine there I'll give an example bare environment. I can give same name, but this time I can simply type, then I can give in my case string, because environment is some dev or anything, right? So I can give anything. If you want to put a descriptions also, if you want you can put it. It is again depends on your choice. You can mention the like a name of the what environment, right? So something like that you can mention, and then you can pass the default value. Like say default value in my case, let's say I'll take as a depth. But one thing, if you notice here, what did you notice here? If you just noticed it, this is much more advanced and structured way. Now here means I'm only defining my environment, that is a depth environment. Similar way, if I have to define the regions, again I need to define another this thing right here, regions. Same way, otherwise I can copy paste it. I can simply change the difference. That's it. This also, if you want, I can do. Let's say I can mention here region, right? Then here I can type this name of the region, like that. I can change it. Then what else? Here I can mention in my region here, like a East US, whatever region. Let's say East US, right? And maybe primary, secondary they will have East US. Let's say. What did you notice here? This looks, if you have to define environment name, regions, under here we also have something like a primary and secondary. If you have to define this, your code looks too big, right? As you type too big, it is not just about the big of, I mean, size of the code. It also matters like how you organize your basically code. That also matters. So this is why knowing the environment to define in the right way is very much matter here. Okay. So this is the reason why instead of defining all the way for different this thing. Now, if I have to call, if you want to pass the environment, you have to call with the again where the origin, then name, something like that you have to define, right? This looks too complex, not complex basically. I would say rather it is not at all best practice and not good way of using it. So this is the reason why we do not use this thing. What we did was, I need to first understand the type of the basic infrastructure or maybe requirement. Based on that only, I have to define the uh, like what you call variables. So in variable, this variable is known for the environment variable, right? This is basically I'm defining the environment that is sorry, I'm defining the variable that is for the environment related. That means now let me remove this one, or let me not remove, but I will just comment it using control question mark. If you do, it will automatically get commented. Select everything. Okay, select everything. Then if you say control plus, there is a question mark. Now if you do, it will go again. Again, if you do once again, it will again be back. That's how we can comment it. That means this will be no more use now because it is commented. Let's understand the first one. As I told you, by environment. The same way, if you go any of the project, this is how the exactly you will be using it. You might be thinking why we don't use like this. As I told you, this is every single you're trying to define or maybe pass the value. It is all isolated different place. So it is quite challenging and difficult to use it and manage also. And reusability is not there here. This is the reason why for environment related, I will define in one particular variables called as environment. Now under environment, as we all know, environment means we do have a multiple set of values, key value, right? That means we have a attributes, right? Now let's understand this way. Now as we all know, object, why we use object, why we use, what is object? First of all, So object, if you see data type, I define here as a string, right? If you see string, I have defined a string, but here I'm giving as a type as object. Question is, why do we need to use the object normally? Do we really require, or can we use any other? The answer is yes. You can also use a map of object, but let's not go that advanced. Let's understand the object itself. What is object now? Object is nothing but to define whenever you're working with the environment with a little bit complex data, you want to define all data in one go. Like in our case, only one variable environment name, that is the environment, variable name called as environment. You want to define everything in one go. So we can use the object. Can also use a map of object, but for that I will discuss later. For now, let's go with the object itself. Now, that means I'm saying that object is nothing but basically whenever I have a different type of data value. Say for example, when that means I will not just have one value. Say example, if you notice here, I given default, I have one. But in this case, let's say I want to define default as a depth I given, whatever is to us also I want to make. That means I want to combine this different name, right? Let's say region as well as this thing. That means they have a two different value, right? So in this case, similar way, if you want to have the key value pair with different basically name, you can use the object. If you're still not clear, let me explain. Now, if you see the object I given, under object, we have a name. This name is nothing but it is a name of the environment. That is why I given name is equal to, because we are talking about the environment. That means I'm saying I want to define the environment, but that is why I'm defining the type of the data. Environment name is nothing but it is environment name, right? So it should be a string, right? So this is why I mentioned a string. Same way, uh, we have something called a type, right? Type here again string. We can also change this one if you based on your thing. Type means you type in what type of it is, whether it is string or maybe this thing, right? So this is basically I need to select either one, right? So I can call with the type as let's say QA, staging or prod, basically environment type basically, right? So I can define anything. So this also string. That means I am defining the environment name and a type, so that it is clear now, because this is part of one object. One object means it is a one attributes. One attributes nothing but it is a one properties. Properties mean you would have a different different some information, right? Let's say about your name, your contact number, your phone, your mobile, your address, your education. There's so many things, right? So this can be one object, so that called as a attribute. So this is one attributes of your environment till here. Till where? Till here. Till here object. This attributes for what? Environment attributes, this one, or environment properties. Same way, now I'm having another attributes. This is another basically attributes or another properties, you can call it in simple terms if you want to understand. Properties, as I told you, you would know now, right? So now within this region, as I told you, object are given, because as I told you, there are different value I have it, right? Primary would have a different value. Secondary, I would have a different value. That means primary, let's say I have East to S, and secondary maybe not Europe, something, any other region also you can define. That means I have a within the region I have a different key value pair, right? So in this case, that means this is one properties. This is a environment properties. First thing is the environment properties. Second thing is a basically under region is that together. If I want to combine and work together, so I can define something like this also. Type as an object. Then on the high level, that is environment type, environment name. I will define. Then within the region, because first environment comes, then region comes, right? So I will define this way. So I stop defining this way. I hope this is clear. Now let's go. I'll remove this one. Same way, resource group. Now resource group also, what I can do, instead of defining this way, I should have done different way. Like how can I do that? So instead of this one, I can simply use variables, right? In my case, resource group, or just mention the resource group or RG, whatever name you can give it. Let's say resource group. Now in my case, again, I can define something like type. Type, as I told you, it is a resource group is a string, right? In my case, let's say instead of I don't want to define the description. Let's just give a default. In my case, whatever value I can pass here, my RG, let's say I can pass it. But question here is why I'm not using this way, because as I told you, again same thing. If I want to, this is only for the username. I mean, resource group. But within the resource group, we also have a resource group ID, right? That means this is a complete properties of the resource group. Simple, right? This is why we use object, right? Because as I told you, in resource group we have a resource group name and the ID of the resource group, right? So why ID of the resource group is required? Because if you want to basically reference or use this particular resource group into some other module or maybe some other resources, you would have to define this ID also. You have to pass with the ID name. This is why, and also for each resource, as I told you, there will be a resource ID. Okay. So this is the reason that it will be unique. That means this is a under resource group. As I told you, resource objects nothing but it is attributes or in or maybe you can understand for now as a properties. Attributes, if you don't understand, say is a properties. So as I told you, I'm talking about the property of what? Resource group. So this is why I'm mentioning as an object. Now within the object, now I'm mentioning resource. What is the name of the resource group type? It is a string. What is the resource group ID? It is also string. So if you want within the same resource type, we can define this way. Normally in your actually project also you will be using same as it is. You will not define separate value like this. Okay. Okay. So let's go next. Next is a tag. Why I'm mentioning very much about tag is because every single project, whenever you work, tag is something mostly being used everywhere, and you would definitely need to be defined in your Terraform code. But there are many ways of defining the code. If you notice here, the tag now I given a tag, you can give any name, whatever the variable name you can give. It can be you can mention as a common tag example, something like that, right? Or maybe underscore. You can give anything. Okay. I will remove the, I don't need this one, so I can keep something like that. That means now I can, this is a variable name. But now if you see type, I can define many way as in again as I told you, I should have defined again string, but string would not help here. Why string would not help? String means it is an individual value, right? Key value pair basically. So I cannot define here as string because I would have a multiple tags. This is why I have to use a map of string. Now map of string, why I use it? Because if you go to the main.tab, let's say I'm talking about red, it is showing this thing because in variable name I have changed it. In my case, I can simply change as common dot this one, right? Now it will be okay. Now your question is, this is one way. Let me remove for now this one. Okay, let me remove this thing. Now if I use like this tags, right? If you see, let me show you better. Wait, if you go to attributes, reference, sorry, examples, right? If you go to example, you would see something like this, right? Now, let me create something, let's say, storage account, right? I can search from here also. Storage account, right? If I click here, maybe it will go somewhere. Yeah, here under resource, right? Storage account. I can search this way also. Now, as I told you, you get a simple code for a tax. Now, if I see what you say, basically you're passing the actually the tag value within the code, right? That means you're passing actually code into the within the pack. Now, if you can copy paste it, or you can mention this thing. That means you can define something like this curly braces. We can use it, right? After tags. So instead of defining the var or the tag name, what I can do is that I can simply use the after uh, tags, then I can mention a curly braces, enter here. Then I can mention the all name of the list of the tag. Let's say I can mention the department is equal to something name. Let's say in my case, I can give a department is equal to IT, but it is actually again string. So I have to pass this way. Similar way I can have it managed by, let's say, right. This way basically is possible to do it. But question is, if you have let's say more than 30 40 tags, normally do you really think that if we can keep the key here, does it look good? Definitely not, right? Because as I told you, you have to try to basically make the core as concise as you can. That means you should not be too lengthy or anything. So whatever value, actual value, need to be passed somewhere so that it will be easy to understand and also easy to use it. This is the reason why we don't want to define. So as I told you, you can have a n number of tags here. Let's say 30 mean 30. But if you have a 30 different tags, it will come till your code. So that means it will not look good at all. So this is why this tag also we have to do. See, this also we can define if you at all want, but we don't prefer to do that because it has to be dynamically, it has to be used right somewhere. So this is the reason why. Now, as I told you, in variable I have used something called as a map of string. Then question is, why do I use a map of string? It's because, why map of string use, Hriyen? Because if you notice here, as I told you, I have only now, this is a key, this is a value, right? For in normal term, you can say this is a key and value pair. That means now, if I want to call this value name as IT, so I have to call with this name. Similar way, if I want to call with this thing, whatever value I have passed in the variable, it will be called out by this name. I mean, if I call with this minus by, this actual value will be extracted or used, right? Same way, if you have a, let's say 30 or 40, so as I told you, it has to be mapped, right? How the Terraform will handle that one, because it is defined in some other folder, how they will this thing. This is why we need to use a map of string, because as I told you, we have to map for each string. That means, as I told you, this is a map way to do. For we have this also string, this also string, there's so many, all are string, right? So if you have a so many string, you want to map together so that it can use in one go. So we can use a map of string, so that you don't have to define every single time. So you can simply map, and this map of string you can define. So whatever the value you're passing, it will be passed. I hope till now you are clear. Now resource group also we are clear. Then this also you are clear. Now let's go with the next one. Is I will go little for maybe this thing, resource group part. Sorry, storage account. Same way I have the this thing also. Whatever you see the value. See, I don't have anything hard coded. All are using the best practice. I have used it on. Let's go with the variables. Now same way as I told you, resource group would have a same concept. So I don't want to explain again, because as I told you, it is also one attributes for the resource group. So I have used as an object. So I'm passing the name as well as the ID. Similar way, storage account. Because again, as I told you, this time is a little concept you need to understand here. This is called as resource group. In resource group, we have a type mentioned as a map of object. You might be thinking, why do we need to use a map of object? Because this is again depends on the situations, right? So if you want, you can simply use the object also. But reason being why I want to use map of object, because if you notice here, this is one object, right? This is map of objects. Okay, in object itself, I have a something called like storage account name as a string, tier as well. It is also a string, replication also string, and this enable failover backup everything string. But if you see under here, under we have something called as a backup retentions optional object. This also, and it has some value, right? Again, this also basically you have two different value. One is a frequency, another is a time. So that is why I have to use the object. Object means, as I told you, it has some attributes, right? So if you just notice, within attribute object, I would have a two attributes, right? One is a frequency and time. Now, if you notice below containers, so whenever you are using, if you work with the Azure, or maybe if you have already tried manually creating the storage account, you might have noticed that there is something called as a storage container, where we can create multiple containers. But question is, these containers are basically within your storage account, right? Within storage account. But imagine now in your actual project, right? You would not just create one storage account. You would have multiple storage account created, depends on the requirement. Now that means Based on that, you would have to basically plan your variable defining also. You should not think that, okay, I'm going to create right now only one storage account. Let me create only one object or maybe this thing, right? I mean, one storage account. They don't do that. It has to be automatic way. That means whatever you're creating, it has to be automatic way. So as you enter the information of the storage account, this should be created. That means you would not do much changes in your Terraform code. That means everything should be done dynamically. So this is why we have to plan well while defining the variables. Now, as you can see here, I'm defining the containers. As I say, containers is nothing but list of object. Why list of object? Because uh, within each container we would have some properties, right? Let's say container ID, container name, or everything, right? So this is the reason why I mention list here, because object mean, as you know, all right, it has some attributes. That means it can have some container name, container ID, or any other information, right? Properties basically of the container. Now question is why I use a list of object, because list means normally in your for each storage account, you would not just have one storage account, right? Sorry, you would not have one container in your storage account. That means within the storage, for each storage account, you would have multiple containers. But how are you going to create those dynamically, right? You cannot simply create, because let me show you. If you go to here, this is the storage account. It is going to create with some default value. And if you come down with the role, you can ignore container. Let's focus on the container, right? Container, maybe it's not there. Okay, let's see here. If you see here, let me know if you can see a container, something like that. Here. That means I want to create the storage account. Within the storage account, I want to create a container. Now, as I told you, you are going to create the storage account. This is okay for me. But within this also need to be create multiple storage account, not one. With, with one code that has to be defined, dynamically created. Same way, I need to create a container. Now, if you see here, for this is only for one container, a storage account. I'm going to create a container called as this name, right? And that means if you can see here, you are actually creating only one container, right? But I would not require only one, right? You would have multiple container created, multiple storage account. That means for each storage account, you can have a multiple containers. So how can you achieve that, right? This is the real time ways, the scenario which I'm explaining it. So I can simply copy paste and modify. I can run. It will create one container only and one storage account. I don't want that to happen. Even the while passing the value also, if you see here, all are using this thing. You can pass like this also, but we don't want to do that because we want to follow the industry best practice, right? So this is why I'm trying to explain you this. So that means now if within the container, as I told you, list of object means list of properties. That means I can have a n number of objects, right? Because list means it is basically properties, right? Properties means it has some attributes about a container. So now I want to have a multiple container. This is why I want to define with this thing list of container object, so that I can define now. This is the about the storage account. Similar to with tag, I don't have to explain because as I have already explained it, you know tag why we have to use. Now let's go. Now you still, if you notice, whatever we have basically explained till now, you might be noticing here, you would not see the value here. Okay, you would not see the value, all the value. Where is the value now? As I told you, instead of defining the value here, if your normal way we can do is, I'm saying, but this is not a best practice. But I wanted to show you. Let's say I want to define as a resource group. I want to name as, let's say, type is equal to string, and string I will mention type as string. Now I can type any default name. Normally I can pass the value here also. Here I mean I can pass the actual value here. That means you can only pass one value, that is for the storage account, right? So that is what, this way also I can do it. But as I told you, I don't want to do this way because this is not being used in this thing. I'm going to the real time base. So that what exactly we are doing here is that instead of passing the actual value in your storage account or maybe in your resource group or whatever resource it is, right? What I'm doing is I'm actually defining only the data type. That means if I want to create a storage account, I mean resource group, I'm only defining the data type for my storage account, and the actual value for this particular storage account will be stored something called as here, right? Terraform.tvars file. Okay, Terraform.tvars file. There is a auto tab.auto.tvars. We have many others, but as I told you, we will explain now. First, understand this for now. That means I'm actually value is not there. If you see the storage account value also, I don't have any value, including the um, variable name. I mean storage account text basically, right? It is not there in value. So let's go to the actually TFBars file where we can see now. If you go here, there's something called as a terraform.tfbars file. Now, sorry, not tfbars, tfstate, tfbars here, right? Now, this is how normally you will be passing it. Okay, resource group, I have not passed it because I want to use within here, but understand this way. Now, if you see here TFBars file of my storage account, you would see something like that. On the storage account, we can have a name of the storage account, right? So if you want, you can basically remove this one, but I can keep also if you want to map it for let's say storage account 1, 2, we have different name, right? So yeah, this way we can map it. Okay, now if you see for is that means this is one storage account. Now in the one storage account call as this storage account actual name. Now this basically tier is equal to mention as standard. If you see tier as a premium, same thing if you see the replication as a ZRS, and here you can see LRS, right? So that means even if you see the container, as I told you, this is a list. So whenever you want to deal with a list of containers or maybe list, one two things you have to use something called as a square bracket. This is called as a square bracket. You have to define it. Use when if you have a multiple list of strings. Okay, list of string mean if you have multiple strings to be defined, then you can use a square bracket. Now this is the reason why I'm using something called as name of the container is a backup. Another container name is a archive. Similar way, the another storage account called as a 900. The first container name is a backup, and this means now I don't have to create multiple storage account in multiple times or this thing. Let's say if I want to create another container name in the storage account, simply what I can do, I can simply copy the name if you require. Otherwise, you can simply what you can do, you can make this thing like that. Then you can mention collaborations use, then space name. I can mention one name of this thing, whatever content name I want. In my case, let's say data, something like that. Okay. Now, as I told, it is also string. You need to mention as a this thing, right? Now, this is how you can use. That means now you don't have to create once again entire area or infrastructure, everything. You simply come and modify in your TFBars file. Same way. Now, if you have a requirement, let's say another storage account I want to create, I want to define some other this thing. Let's say what I can do is I can simply copy paste the same this thing. What I can do, I can simply copy paste it within the storage account block. Okay, in the same storage account block, because this all created dynamically based on the Terraform that I created. Now, what I can do is I can simply come here, copy paste it, only change the name. If you want 3, let's say whatever name you want, now you change this name. Let's say I give him this name. If you want to change any value, if you want to remove this thing, change something. If you don't want this one, you can remove it, right? You want to just put archive, or maybe let's say in this case, let's say test. Here I can mention any name, just for example, the SQL, right? SQL, something like that. That means now you understood, right? So now you will not create entire storage account. I mean, you don't have to define entire Terraform code once again for the new storage account. Rather, you would only define the changes you will do in the TFBars file. Now, what you did basically, you want to create new storage account and I want to define new container also, or one or two, depends on your requirement. I simply copy the same block and copy paste the changes that I want to make it. That means these two, remember, for your understanding, these two will not be doing any changes if you do this change also, because this is a new Terraform will check the changes that you make in your code as well as state file. If these two are matching, at the same time they will definitely check your real-time cloud, what was created the resource. Let's say this particular two resource already created a storage account. So now if it's already created, you would have a state file also, right? So now they will check, the Terraform would check, they'll check the state file. Also, they will check with this also changes them. That means this is not there in the state file, right? Because this is just now we are going to create. That means now they will only be creating this particular storage account, nothing else. Now I hope this is clear for now, till now. Now, as I told you, this is how you can define it. Now let's go to the storage account, how I defined it. Let's say if I go to the where is that? Yeah, right. Let's go to the main.tf. Now, if you notice main.tf, as I told you, how I got this value, right? If you notice, let me just comment it out for now so that I can show you. So let's say I want to call the name, as I told you, I can call something like this, right? Always remember one thing, whenever I want, basically you need to know what is the name of the resource group that you want to define it. Whether you want to define the name based on the environment name or based on some primary, secondary case like that. So it's again depends on your requirement, right? If you want to mention, I want to, if you see the first example, it says that first it should be the this thing. So actually what will be the value if you see here? If the value would be like this, something like this, if you call this thing, the value will be like this. How it will be passed? Because you are mentioning the RG, this is coming the hard coded value, because I want to give some naming in front of the variable, so that you can give like that, so that I will give this, so that it should start with the RG, then dollar sign dollar with the I will define the curly braces, because I want to pass, or I want to call the variable name, call it environment name. Now till here where dot you got, right? This whenever you want to call the variable from another this thing, if you're using some other, before there's some other value, like say any value you want to use with or this thing variable, then you have to call, always you have to use the what do you call this one, uh, um not getting the name now, percentage, I mean square, I mean this thing dollar sign, right? We have to use a dollar sign. That means if you want to call, whenever before the variable, if you want to pass some value, that is basically a name or anything which is not defined the variable, you always need to define, while along with that, if you want to define the variable, you have to use the uh, dollar sign with the curly braces, and then you have to, within that you have to define the variable name. So what it will happen now, var.environment.name. Now if you go to the var.environment.name, because this particular, if you see here variable, I have defined it here, right? Var.environment name I define, name in it will tag, but this name is taken from where? This particular name is actually passing in your tvars file. Now if you go to the tvars file, what will be name? I think here, right? Terraform.tf state. Yeah, sorry, not tf state, it is what is that? Terraform. Yeah. Now that means uh, environment name, right? Okay, I think I have not passed the environment name. That's okay. I have passed it in somewhere maybe. Anyway, okay. So the whatever environment name you have passed it, that will be taken that value. So let's go back. That means whatever, if you dev queue, whatever you hear, it will be taken that name only. Okay. Now let's say I have given in the storage account, let's say something name, let's say dev, it will be like this. Then again it will be, if you see here again after the line, there is again one, I use hyphen, right? Hyphen I can use it, a hyphen it will be like this. If you don't want hyphen together, if you want, you can remove it. In my case it is a hyphen. Now again whatever region, in my case again, in this particular, what is the region I have defined, based on that it will be taken. So in my case, let's say east to west, let's say I have defined the region as a east to west, is to s, right? Now it will be something like this. The actual name will be like this, but I don't want to define this manually, right? As I told you, it has to be done dynamically. So based on your company or project naming standard, you can define any name that they want. Okay, not just this environment or this name, they have some naming standard with some other arguments, so you can also do it similar way. But now say for example, If you notice, there is a one line, right? I can see that the hyphen in between. If you don't want to make this, let's say I want to keep the resource group name as like this, something like this, right? So I can do this also by removing the line. There is a line, right? After each variable, there is a line, hyphen. Remove this hyphen. This hyphen. This is how it should be working. Okay. Okay. Now let's go with the next one. That's something called as a storage. What you call account. Now this is the reason I was saying it. I don't want to create only one storage account. Why? How I pass the value? Let me explain this one. As I told you, you don't have to worry about the actual value because I'm passing the tier bars, but you should know how to pass them. You have to practice it. Okay. In my case, as I told you, it is passed in a tier bars file, nothing in the tier bars file. I mean variable file here. Everything is passed in a tier this thing. I'm simply defining the data type. That's it. Now let's go to the point. Now, as I told you, I have defined something called as for is. The reason why we use a for is, as I told you, for is if you want to use. Before that, let me give a small idea. So you should also have some idea, right, to work with something called a meta. This is called basically meta argument. Specifically, this why we use if you want to deal while dealing with a resource creation. Okay, if you want to work whenever you want to deal with the resource creation time, right? There is a normally we have something called the meta argument, right? The meta argument we have arguments. The first one, or there's nothing called first or second. I can give one of them. First one, let's say count. We have COUNT count, right? And then second we have for each. Sorry, my bad. For each, right? These two normally, if you want to deal with the conditionally, that means dynamically. If you want to deal, okay, if you want to create the any resource dynamically, what normally these two meta argument will be used. One is a count, second is a for each. Now question is, when in what situations can I use the count and the for each? We have discussed last time, but in today's sessions, as I told you, it is much more into the real time case. So I would be explaining exactly in the real time based scenario. Okay. Okay. Now what I'll do. Okay. Okay. Now, okay, let's go with the first one. Count. Count. Why we use this count? If you have, let's say, because we are talking about the storage account, or could be any other resource. I'm just giving an example. Let's say you are creating resource, right? Say for you are creating resource called as storage account in Marcus, STO storage, right? Now say I want to create storage account, but now this storage account, if you see the documents, only by default can create one storage account, right? Now, if you want to create a very similar configuration, like identical, right? Identical configuration. Identical means is nothing but it is a same configuration or altogether, same configuration or altogether, same or identical. You can call identical. Identical means that you would have a similar configurations of your storage account, right? So in this case, by default, as I told you, one is going to create. But as I told you, I do not want to have or create only 10 storage account with configuration. That means with one storage account configurations, I want to create count is equal to count is equal to 10. That means 10 storage account at the same time will be created. But this time for each storage, there is something called as a would be identical. How it will be identical? In terms of the properties remains almost same, but then the resource name will be the resource group name. Sorry, this account my storage. Let's say my storage. Let's say this will be the default name, right? This is the default name. Now there is something called as a This is default name. Now there's something called the index number, right? Index, INDEX, index number. The index number always start with what? 0 by default. It will start with 0. Index number. That means if you want to define the 10 virtual machine, sorry, 10 storage account, at last it will be created as it will be at, because as I told you, it is identical. That means with this particular name, that is my storage plus, it will be 1, sorry, this will be plus 0. That means 0 will be added. That means actual name would be something like this: my storage 0. This will be name. So as I told you, 10 means at last it will be same name, my storage 9. This is 9. Okay, why 9? Because as I told you, the index number start with 0. This we can change now. If you want to change this behavior also, I can use some matter. I can use some conditions there also. If let's say if you want to the count should start with a 10, means I can mention some argument. I can make here instead of 10, I can mention, if you want to put in your count here 10, I can give a plus symbol here. Plus, I can give a this thing. I have shown already that time, right? With a plus this thing argument, I can use it. From which number you want to start? This is one situation. That means whenever I want to create the identical resources, I'll be using the count. But this is one situations. But another real-time situations when I can use is, again, I'm talking about the count. Don't be confused. Okay. So I'm talking about count only. Let's go another example of the count. Okay. Let's say now. Okay. Let me maybe make this little this thing, right. Another example of count. Say for example, I have again storage account. This time also storage account I want to create. But this time I have a different requirement. What I want is, in storage account we have a different, let's say it can be many situation I can give you, but I'm giving you one of the simplest example. There can be a thousands of example I can give. Okay, let me give you another example. Let's say this is again using the count. Okay, I'm saying using count again, count, right? Count, using count. This time what I don't want to create 10. What I want is, this time I want to create, let's say this particular storage account, if it is, let's say SQ, you know the SQ, right? SQ, the SQ, if it is equal, right, storage account is equal to, let's say, standard D, I think, right? Standard, yeah, standard. And sometimes we can also have a what else, premium, right? Premium. So what it means for each storage account also, this can be any other properties. I'm just giving one example. Okay, now I want to say, now I want to create the storage account, then only you create the, that means if in your TF file, right, if it is, let's say, if it is standard, then only the storage account need to be created. If it is a premium, then no, don't create it. This is the condition basically I want to play around. That means I want to share, boss, based on the policy, or maybe this requirement is there dynamically, not by defining. I can use, I can call with the particular set this thing, but I want to set dynamically it has to create. That means I don't want to think much about that. I want to count meta arguments that if this condition, let's say standard, then only please create one resource, that is a one storage account going to create, not 10. Or maybe if you want to create 10, if it is standard 10, you can also give 10. That depends on you. And but if it's a premium, then don't create it at all. So how can we do this? Also possible with the help of count meta arguments. How we can do that? So just let me show you now. Now let's First one you understood, right? Just what I'll do, let's say I'm going to create, let's say you can ignore for now this one, right? For now you can ignore. But one thing, when I use this thing, as I told you, you will not be using this will not work syntax, because this syntax is used only for this meta argument. This cannot be used like this. You cannot use for each and count together in one resource block. That means in our case, if I using the sorry, for each is equal to whatever, I mean whatever for each, if you you cannot use a count, or if you using count, you cannot use a for each. That is this thing. You cannot handle two at a time in the same resource block. That means here, right? So, but you can ignore for now this one, because as I told you, this will only support for your for each meta argument, not for the count meta argument. But let's understand, you can ignore the syntax for now, but understand the value of it. Okay, you can ignore how the data concept. Now, as I told you, this is only for the voice. Let's understand count. If I have to create, let's say based on this value, let's say I want to create count is equal to, I can give, let's say 10, right? That means based on this configuration, whatever I have it will be created 10 storage account. But as I told you, I don't want to do this. So what I want is, I want to say, if this particular storage account, the SQ is standard, then only you create the storage account. Otherwise, don't create it. Can we do that? Yes, it is possible. How can we do that? So based on that, I have to know the where this SQ is defined. So in my case, where dot, maybe SQ is defined within this, maybe here, right? Variables. Check your SQ somewhere. If you see the SQ somewhere, right? Okay, it is not SQ, it is a tier, something, whatever is a tier or SQ, whatever name you can make. In my case, I given as a SQ or tier. Okay. In my case, that means standard premium I want to create. How can I do that? That means what I can do, I can call where dot and variable name, that is a storage account, dot this name, that is the variable name. That is a, this is what I want, right? Standard or this thing. Now let me select this tier. That means, so here what I have to do is that I can simply var dot storage accounts dot tiers, right? Tiers. Then I'm saying I have defined, but defining this will not help you. I need to use some condition here, some functions here. I have to use. What is my requirement? I want to say, if this particular tier, if it is a standard, then only it has to create. Otherwise, you don't have to create. So this is what I want to do. So I can use a here is equal to this thing, because as I told you, I want to use with the help of some condition, right? Is equal to means if it is equal to this value, then I can mention the, in my case, standard it'll check standard. Then now if it is standard, question marks. That means I'm trying to say now, boss, this particular number, what is checked, whether it is standard. If it is standard, then create one. What if it's not standard? If it is not standard, it can create colon, it can zero. That means now what I use with the help of count also, I can say that if is this particular storage account is the tier is equal to standard, you have to check it. Then you have to create one. If it is not standard or some other value, then you can zero is nothing but it's you're not going to create. This is the one way of using it. There will be thousands of example we can have it basically. Say example, let me give another example. Same way, I can give this is equal to. I can give not equal to also. So let's say instead of one, if you have a requirement, you can change this also. Let's say like this 20. That means if it is standard, let's create 20. Otherwise, don't create. This is one example. Otherwise, I want to say not equal to. Let me use one not equal to meta arguments using count, right? Yeah, please.
Hriyen, I'm just having
Yeah.
a query.
Okay.
Actually, the count you're telling, like if it is equal to standard tier,
Hmm.
create 20 storage until it
Yes.
reaches 20 or
Yeah. So if you're creating with this condition, actually, condition, what is the count condition? Count condition basically based on the number of specified the count number it will create, right? That means I'm trying to check in this particular variable under storage account variable called as the tiers. If tier is standard is equal to mean it has to be matched, right? If it is
right.
matching the standard, then you created 20. If it is not standard, then you don't have to create 0.
Create 20 storage
Yes, account.
accounts.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Okay.
would run like 20 times and
No,
create
it's
that
not
20
done 20.
accounts.
It will keep creating 20 times the 20 storage account.
Oh, directly, just for
Yes, yes.
one condition met,
Yeah.
if
That's
it
why you don't
matches,
have to
it would
define 20 times this block. You don't have to define 20 times.
no
So
need to
I'm
define,
using
but it
some
would reiterate.
keep
It would
keep keep
rerun that.
creating one by one. Yes. Okay. This is how.
Okay.
So normally we don't do 20
And
times. We'll do one only normally. But if you want, you can do that. That's what it is.
where do we give the inputs? Like this queue is standard,
Okay.
accounts tier is standard.
This one same thing only we can define. Okay. Same for is only how we can define the variable like this. We can use it. Same like this only we can do object map. We can use object or map object depends on that. We can use this meta that are like we have here, right? Here.
Under
Okay.
variables.
Hmm. Only the calling it, if you see here, if you while calling it, because as I told you, I'm using for is no, that is why I'm using the is dot value.
Mhm.
If you don't want to call this thing, then you don't have to use the is dot count. Sorry, is dot value. You don't have to use that one. Okay. I'll give
Okay.
one
So
example.
for
Yeah.
count, we should not use each, right?
Yes, we should not use.
Okay. Instead of that, what do we use for count?
Okay. So instead of this one, if you don't want this thing, now we have to get the value basically where dot whatever value we have, don't name, no. We have to call it with a name. Let's say if you have a name, what name I want, where dot, sorry, storage account, let's say. We are dealing with storage account, right? Name, maybe this one, dot name, because it has to iterate. And before that, I will be using your index number. Because as I told you, there is index number, right? Count or index. Count or index. Like this. Okay. That means instead of using this one, because now what I'm trying to say now, I will create one or let's say 20, 10, let's say for this thing better understanding 10. I'm saying now, boss, first go to the variable file, call as a storage account variable name. I mean storage account name variable, call as storage account. There is something called as a name behavior. That means here we have under variables, we have a name, right? Storage account name. That means this is a string. That means I want to create based on the conditions. But as I told you, that means I will not here some name, right? I will not have only one storage account, right? Because for each storage account should be unique, right? So that is why I have to call with a counter index number before the name. Clear? So this resource group name remains same because this resource group actually can be used in many ways. The reason why I'm using this Azure RM basically nothing but you might be still thinking, can I use some other? Yes, you can use another way. Let me not maybe comment here this one, right? Oh, let me comment this one for now so that I can show you better. We can use again resource group name. Let's say I can use a where dot resource group dot name. I can use like this also, right? There's nothing wrong using these two. But you might be thinking, what is the difference between where the resource group name and the Azure RM resource group dot name, right? So it's nothing but if you're talking about the where or a resource group name, it's actually coming from the variable. That means from this where dot there is a resource group, right? If you go here, there is a resource group. This one, you are actually using it from here because where dot resource group name dot name is there, so you are calling from here. So another way which I mentioned about the Azure RM, right? Azure RM is coming from where? Azure RM is coming from, you have to see the resource block. This resource block is for what? Storage account. That means now I want to say I don't care what the resource group is, but I want to basically create the resource group. Okay, I want to create the storage account based on my resource group. That means wherever my resource group is created in the same resource group location, I have to create the storage account. In that case, I can use Azure RM with the local name. If you see here, Azure RM, that means whatever location I have defined here, same region or location, your storage account is going to be created. Is it clear? So if you see here, Azure RM name I have given, .rg I given, and name is coming from here. That means this name will be used for this particular storage account. Whatever is there, this particular storage account will be created in this particular resource group. This is what it means. I'm calling directly from the your Terraform file only. And then while defining, as I told you, if you want to define from the variable, that also you can do so. Both are optional. I mean, options are there. You can choose either one. Okay. I hope this is clear, Kaun.
Actually,
Uh,
just one last query.
yeah.
You have mentioned like count equal to if Kotter is standard.
Okay.
So will it go to the variable file and check whether it is standard or not, or
Yes,
where
yes,
does the
yes.
input
That's what.
lies?
Yeah, that is why I have defined it. If they will check it, if it is matching the conditions, that means if your TR is not mentioned, let's say premium or maybe nothing mentioned, then it will not create, it will fail. Otherwise, basically, if it's not, if say it is this thing, if it will create. But if it is, let's say you have instead of the standard, you have a premium in, then it will not create because premium in, as I told you, only if it is a standard, it should create.
Okay, got it.
Another example, let me give you so that it will be clear. Same thing about the storage account. I'll give you one more example. Now let's talk about the uh, what can I give? Okay, let me give a replication type. I'm saying, let's say there can be a, depends on the situation. I can handle in many ways it, but I'll give one way. What I want is normally, let's say I'm giving let's say replication type, right? Replication type you see here, I can give LRS, GRS, whatever this thing. But if you go to TFVars file, let us see the replication. TFVars file. Can you see here somewhere? Ah, here, right? So TFVars file. If you see TFVars file, now replication type we have this thing. There is a LRS, this thing. Now I want to say, for now you can ignore this. There are so many storage account. Just think, let's talk about the one, this one. Okay, let's talk about the only one. So as I told you, now we have a replication type as a LRS, but by this is the default I have created. Now I want to say, if it is the LRS, because LRS is already created, let's say, right? If it is LRS, that means it is already created, right? Because as I told you, this you can ignore this one. This is already created. If it is a LRS, you don't create it. If it is a LRS, or maybe if it is other than LRS, you create it otherwise. Can be like equal to, not equal to. You can give any, you can handle it many ways. Let's say this is a LRS. Now I want to do that. If it is a LRS, then don't create it. Or you can mention as if it is not LRS, something else, then you have to create it like that. That means LRS means it should not be creating because it is created. So anything that is apart from the LRS, you should create. How can we do that? So if it is LRS, it should not be creating, right? So where is that? Yeah. So what I can do? What did I say? If it is LRR, you should not create it. If it is something else, then you can mention. What you can do if it is not. I can mention if it is LR not create mean you can use a not equal to meta argument here with the count. So what I can do store account uh, replication type, right? Let's say I can mention the symbol. This is not equal to sign, right? Not I'm saying now if the replication type is not equal to LRS, right? So I can give a LRS something. What is that? LRS, right? I'm saying, sorry, my bad. It is a colon. What I mean to say now, this way also I can use. I'm saying now, if particular storage account, the replication type, if it is not LRS, then create one. Otherwise, don't create it. That means, in this case, in TFVars file, it is already LRS, right? So in this case, because it is not equal to means, obviously it is there already in that LRS in the TFVars file. So this time it will not create. But let's say in the TFVars, if you go here, if you change this one into let's instead of standard, let's say instead of LRS, sorry, not standard, ZRS, something like that, right? Replication type ZRS, let's say ZR. So you can ignore the small letter actually. ZRS, let's say. That means now, if it is not, that means it is not matching, right? I mentioned replication type as this thing ZRS that time. That means it is not a LRS, right? So if you go here, sorry, my bad, here, right? So that time, what I mean, I'm saying now, I'm saying if it is not LRS, that means this time it is not equal to means it is not matching, right? It is not matching with my this thing. It is a ZRS here. That means this time, what happens now? Not equal to this not matching, then it should create it. So the matching or it is not matching, so it is not going to, it is going to create now for us because it is not matching, because not equal to I mentioned. If it is not matching, then only it create, and as simple, because here we given as a LRS, there we given as a ZRS, so it is not matching. This is not equal to I mentioned, then you create, otherwise you don't have to create. If it is matching, that means if it is already created or matching of LRS, then you don't have to do so. So this is the reason why I can use in many ways actually for what I call meta arguments using count. Okay, but this is how it is. Let's talk about the forest. Forest is quite opposite that one. Forest is very simple, but complex also, that complex it use. When we can use a forest, maybe I will give you a simple way to make you understand. Say for example, we are creating storage account again. Let's take the same example. Now, okay. First thing, as I told you, for is right. For is. For is why we use, where we use, in what situation we use. For is if we want to use, let's say we can use two situations. One is a map. Second is a set of strings. string, right? Strings. So that means whenever you're dealing with the forest, you can sorry, yeah, whenever you are actually working with the forest, in this situation, if you have a multiple complex data based on the map value or maybe set of the strings, you can use a forest value, or sorry, forest meta argument. Okay, example, map is nothing but right. Say example, you think some name, here we have some name is equal to some value, let's say. Same thing here, we have some name one, right? Name here, some value, something value like that, and name two, some value we have like that, no? So if you want to map this all the key value pair, right? So this is why we can use a forest. Let's say that means, let me see. If I have, let's say, I have now how many name I want to map? Now I have, this is name one, this is name two. I want to map this one with the key value pair together, means with the help of the count will not possible. That is not possible. So with the forest now, if you want to use as I told you map, no, I want to map now. That means mapping with what? Everything together. Key value pair with multiple this thing. What you call name, right? I want to call this thing 1, 2, 3. I have right. It's a 4, 5, and so on. If you want to map all this thing, then we can go with the forest. That means based on the number. That means if you have mentioned 2 persons name, only 2 person name will be mapped it. If you have given 3 persons name, 3 person name will be mapped it, whatever with the value. It is as simple. Okay, so let's see that one. If you go right, let me take you there. Sorry, what was there? Okay, here, right. So let me remove now. I will comment it for now. As I told you, I don't need for now. Okay, let me commented this. Sorry, my bad. I will comment it. What happened? I will make this one right. We can maybe this also we can remove it. I don't need this no for now. I can remove this also. Then this was group name. I can keep it as it is. Okay. Now I can this also as I told you forest right. Now I can also make this also so that I'll keep this also so that you can go through later. So what I need is I want to define a name right. Sorry, it should be small letter. Okay. Now what I want is, as I told you, forest. Let's understand. I have not defined a name for now, but let's understand how the forest map. What did I say just now? I told clearly that this map can be used only in 2 scenarios where you have a map or set of strings. That map can be a not just a map. It can also have a like if you have a something like let's say map against class map. What do you mean? That means map inside map. I can have it, or I can have inside map. Also, I can also have a set of strings. Set of strings, try strings. Now let us see this. So just imagine this situation. Map mean you understood now. That means if I have defined the two values or only 2 times or 2 values will be mapped together. If you have mentioned another person name, let's say 3, it will be mapped with 3. Same way, now you will be able to understand easily. Now let me take you to the this thing. What happened? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, some issue maybe I was moving it. Let me remove it. Okay, let me remove my. Okay, it's hang. Okay, so let me go here. So I was saying about this thing. Let us understand how forest works now. What did I say? I say forest means only when you're mapping. Now let me show you. Now let's talk about the first one. As I told you, cown and forest not cannot be used. What I basically want, I want to for use a forest because within the forest meta argument, I'm calling the variable call as a storage account because I want to pass the value from my storage account variables. This is why I need to call from here, right? That means I can clear here, I can define here, right? So I can have this one. That means now what it is going to do is that I'm going to call with a variable call as a storage account. Inside this, whatever properties is there or maybe attributes are there, I'm going to be using within my storage account property, right? Because I need a name, location, tiers, and everything. It has to be passed dynamically, not manually, right? This is the reason why I'm calling from the variable, variable file. Now question, let us see what is there inside here. As we have already seen that this is how it should be. Now if you see here, I use a map of object. What did I say? Anytime where you're dealing the map or the set of strings, you would be using the thing. Set of string mean you can have multiple strings, right? That you can use what you call for it. Now if you see the map, again, why I have already explained your object also, because map mean you are mapping, object mean it has some attributes, right? That is why I'm mapping with the help of map of object, this thing. Now data type. So now I'm telling now storage account name is string and tier also string. This is all string, but here again it is a optional object, and container, as I told you, it's a list of object. So in this case we can go with the forest, right? Now, so having said that, if I want to call with the name, now what I do, I will define, because in the forest level I have called with the variable name, right? Bed or a variable name I have called it, and then what in our case it is a storage account name, then I will call with the name. Now here, this is the reason why I'm calling it for, if you see here, for is I'm calling with the variable name, and but what then I have called to extract the data from this variable, that is the storage account variable. Now let me, before that, let's not define name here. Let me define the name here itself, because it has to be just below the forest always. Yeah, the forest should be always on top. Okay, whether it is forest account, the meta argument should be always on top of your name or resource name. Let's do that. Now what I want now, whenever I want to work dynamically using forest, I always need to call with the, if you want to pass the name of the storage account name, you have to call with the is dot value, right? Dot is dot value. Why the is dot value is going to be taken by default, because I have used this meta argument from your storage account, whatever value is there. For that is meant for is, basically map, right? For is map is nothing but from each map we did a mapping, right? For is map, whatever value is there, right? That means name is equal to some name I given, right? I have to extract it. This is why I can give a name. You understood now, right? So that means for, if I have multiple, this thing, now I have only here, if you see here, only one data, only for the storage account default one, right? But with the same name, this name, variable name, I copy this name. If you copy this same name, let me copy. But if you go to tier bars, as I told you, this is the real time I'm explaining it. So if you go real time, I mean here, if you just copy paste here and search with your name, this is the same name. So that means whatever variable name that you define in your variable names, I mean variable.tf files, same name you have to pass it here. This is not, you cannot give something like this. So it will not work, because the same variable name should be passed into your TFVers file. That is your Terraform.tvers file. You cannot give any name that you want. That name has to be defined based on the variable you define in your child module. Okay, we'll understand later what is child module and the root module. For now, just understand here. Okay, so now Shikhan. Now this now we have this one, right? Now whatever name I have, so I want to call now for each one, I want to call the, because this is a map, right? Now if you see here, this is one storage account properties, that means this is one person, you can think this is another person's storage account, this is another storage account name, similar to with different configurations, right? Same way I have another one, third one, right? So now that means we have different value, different attributes, right? How can you map them, right? This is the reason why we are using the forest meta argument, so that instead of creating multiple times, just like a count mean it will be a only single configurations with the same configuration, like a identical, only the resource name will be changed, but configuration wise it is same. But here if you notice, for each configurations of your storage account would be different properties or attributes, right? So it has a different value. So if you want to work with this kind of situations, so and call that also dynamically, so you can use it using forest. This is the reason why I told you, if you want to create one more storage account, just copy paste and modify your TFVers file to make one more changes. That's it, your work is done. You don't have to work and modify entire core or what it much. Okay, so that is why, that means this time 3 storage account has to be mapped. Now this is the reason why, where is that, this is the reason why we are giving a, yeah please, yeah money. Am I audible?
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, no.
Okay, okay. I'm just stepping out, Hriyen. Shall we continue post lunch, or you want to carry forward? Which is fine.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll connect later after 3 o'clock maybe.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks. Okay, so fine. So we have understood this thing. Now what we will understand about this forest here name, right? So as I told you, whenever you want to deal with thing, forest normally for each map, whatever the value you are trying to pass, the value what I want to value for my name. This is why I'm giving a name. Same thing if you want to give for the locations also, I can define it. Normally location will be taken from your primary, secondary. I don't need to define here, but as I told you, tier something I will be needing. So for each storage account from the map, I will be taking dynamically with the tier name. That is why I'm mentioning the value for each map for the tier, basically the attributes basically. Okay, so same way I can do further. Same thing for tag also. As I told you, tag can be a map of strings. Basically, this is the reason why I want to define this way so that it looks much simpler. So now that means if you use this way, you will be creating 3 storage account instead of just 1 or maybe 2. So in this case, you would not define how many want to create. This will be created based on the number of the map you're doing. Let's say if you're doing the 3 times or 3 different properties or 4 times, based on that, it will be created. That many number it will be created. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so we will have something called the output. We will understand output also later, maybe after some time. But for now, yeah, let's not do that. Maybe we can wind up the sessions here for now. Once again, thank you so much, team, for joining us. See you in the afternoon. Yeah.